but it's okay. This should take long, I think. Yeah. What's your view on it?
Kia ora koutou. Nau mai haere mai and welcome to this council meeting of Tuesday the 30th of July. Welcome to elected members, council staff. We appear to have some kind of echo on the live stream. Can we sort that out, please? And while we sort that out, I will ask Councillor Handford to please deliver the council blessing. Thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Handford.
Cool, kia ora, and great to be back. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua whai mo ngā hapori i mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi i roto i te kotahitanga me te aroha. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Handford. Next we have apologies. I haven't received any. Does anybody want to pass on any apologies? Councillor Pravanov. Do you have an apology?
Oh, no, I'm just saying.
You're moving them? Okay, moved by Councillor Pravanov, seconded by Councillor Kirby. All in favour? Aye. So we don't have any apologies, so we didn't need to do that actually, but good to cover it off. We have moved and seconded that we have no apologies. Okay. Shall we move and second that we have no declarations of interest? But I think we actually have one, don't we? Mr. Mansell?
One. No, 7.2, I guess it is. Public excluded anyway. I shall vacate the room.
Yeah, Mr. Mansell has declared an interest relating to the public excluded item on today's agenda. We don't need to move and second that actually. Public speaking time. We have Pat Doonan in person. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, I should just like to thank the staff for the fact that you have a slide there that I sent just about an hour ago, and so I'm pleased to say how quickly you've responded and appreciate it. And I see it's been circulated also. I'm speaking on behalf of the Waikanae Beach Residents Society Incorporated, as well as myself. My submission to you is that if something's not broken, then don't try and fix it and make it worse. As the slide will show you, the status quo boundaries for the wards, which assuming that the Maori ward is put in place, that you continue with that, it turns out that in terms of representation, the status quo is very satisfactory, well within the tolerances for all of the wards. But what is being proposed to you is a change of boundaries, particularly the one for the Otaki Waikanae boundary, which has the effect of pushing the representation ratios out of kilter and triggering the requirement for a local government commission review. So you're being asked to create a situation where there needs to be a review. And you're being asked to do this for what I think are spurious reasons. in particular, the question of the two Horos being in the Otaki or the Waikanai ward was intensively discussed at the last representation review, and even more intensively discussed at the local government commission hearing. And you can see that if you listen to the video, where then Councillor Coots made the case extremely strongly. He devoted about half his presentation, which was with the mayor, but he led it, I think, or technically you led it, I think, as deputy mayor, but Councillor Coots had the biggest speaking time, and he devoted half of that to making the case for Te Horo to be in the Otaki ward. And he had a number of reasons. They included Rakawa considerations, which are not relevant if you are going to have a Maori ward. But more importantly, the local government commissioners sat there and listened and asked the questions, and then wrote a report in which they state that it is their job and they have considered all elements of the matter, and that they note that legally they are required to approach a review as if it is ab initio. In other words, they give no status to, or rather they consider all the matters, and they can't just skip. So they decided that on balance, having heard it all, that Te Horo has links to both wards, and that it was entirely satisfactory for it to be in the Waikanai ward. And there is no new information. If it was going to be, the case was going to be made for a move, it really should have been up there in that preliminary engagement. And again, the local government commission actually said that was the way to manage it in their judgment. So what we have here is a unneeded and detrimental proposal to change something that is satisfactory. So I just want to say to you that you have on the slide, and therefore in front of you, just the numbers which show how it distorts the representation. And finally, that the one and only issue that has been mentioned of a more recent time, a new issue, was the concern of some Te Horo area residents that they were separated from others because the boundary runs down particularly the middle of Te Horo Beach Road. Now, I've done the research, which I've sent to you in the email, as to why you get that outcome, and it turns out to be a dysfunctional relationship between the way stats approach things and your kind of local body representation. I've explained it there. They go down the middle of a road because that's how it's easiest to collect census forms. And that the remedy, to the extent that one is needed, to that issue is to ask stats to move the mesh boundary. Now they can do that, and so I'll just conclude by saying that there is therefore no case for a change in regard to Otaki. I can't speak for the Paraparaumu matter, but I do note it too worsens representation. And I urge you therefore to reject the staff proposal and to instead go for your initial proposal with the status quo boundary of between Waikanai and Otaki wards.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to take questions.
Thank you for your presentation and for the work that you've put into this. And it's great to have the information visually presented today. So thanks for the effort that's gone in. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Pat. I find your case completely compelling. I just wondered about the in terms of the approach that we might take, just to, I mean, we can get stats to move a mesh boundary, but you know, and I'll be dead and buried before they'll make their changes. So in terms of us just going across the road and bringing the rest of Te Horo into the Waikanae boundary, do you see any issues around that? Does it look on paper a fairly simple process politically?
Well, I sought the data on what would be involved to take the mesh blocks that are have boundaries on the north side, so to speak, of Te Horo Beach Road. And eventually Stats actually gave it to me, even though they say that they don't release such data, but they have sent it to me and I have given it to yourselves. Well, you had it. I mean, your staff had it. Bottom line is that there'd be 700, on my calculations, it'd be about 700 at most, probably less. And that that would actually, if you took those mesh blocks and added them to Waikanae, it would in fact improve further the representation proportionality, and it would also in effect say that Waikanae Ward stretches from the Waikanae River to just below the Otaki River, which has a certain logic to it. So that would be feasible. I haven't advocated that as such. I think that appropriately you could go with the status quo and have people submit, and I'd be prepared to submit on that basis, and then you could take your final proposal. Whereas if you go with the staff proposal, then it's all going to be a big dogfight on that issue with a lot of submissions, and I put it to you that you'll end up coming back to the status quo and having spent a lot of time, wasted a lot of time by moving away from it.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Pat, for all the work that you have done over the last, or actually number of months, in terms of providing us with good background information on this. So, so I've got a couple of questions. So my first question is, obviously you've got your head around this really well. Is it fair to say that there was actually, and I suppose the way the survey was done, there wasn't a specific question about boundary changes there. Is it fair to say that there was actually no major swing, there was no major set of comments about the boundary needs to be moved north or to the south? So in reality, those who made no comment are relatively satisfied with the situation.
Yes, I mean, 75% of people said everything's just fine. Other people said they were concerned about representation, but none of them actually pinpointed this because they were concerned about the ratios, and these make the ratios worse. Now, there's some anecdotal comment being made about this question of residents on one side of the road being in one ward and on the other being in the other ward. I've explained why that happens and suggested there are much more satisfactory remedies than this radical proposal, really, to relitigate what the Local Government Commission determined. And it is a relitigation. So nobody has, as far as I'm aware, I mean, obviously I haven't studied every submission, but I'm not aware of any submission that sort of identified this issue and suggested that it should be solved in the way that the staff proposed. In their paper, in the paper in front of you, they revert to what was said in 2021, but that was fully considered by the Local Government Commission exhaustively. And I suggest that you will damage the reputation of the KCDC with the Local Government Commission by going back and sort of relitigating this, particularly relitigating it on the proposition that that the Local Government Commission didn't do its job properly.
So thank you, through the chair again. So that was actually the other point I wanted to bring up. So I was around the council table in the previous training when this was considered, and council knew very well it was a plus or minus 10% requirement. The council decided not to meet that requirement, knowing very well it had to go to the commission to make a decision. And so here again, it looks like that plus or minus 10% is not being met again. And so yet again, this council is potentially going
Is there a
back
question
to the
in
commission
there,
again.
Councillor Pravanov?
Do you think that that is appropriate?
Well, I've just, as I've indicated, I don't think it reflects well on the KCDC to sort of create a situation where there needs to be another local government review, trying by proposing to overturn, completely reverse precisely a key decision of the Local Government Commission in 2022. So, and there's no discussion of the implications of, you know, doing that sort of thing in the staff paper.
Mr Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Pat, for coming in and chatting with us. I'm chair of the Otaki Community Board, and you might think that this would sort of increase my fiefdom, so to speak. But certainly, having chatted with Te Horo people, I would feel that they would actually support moving that line south. From the perspective that you're the Waikanae Beach Residents Association spokesperson, you don't cover Te Horo Beach, do you?
We're considering it.
Right.
We haven't made the move. We increased our coverage to cover Peka Peka at our, last year. And the reports we had from Michael Moore, at least that I heard in one of the workshops, was that the Te Horo, people in Te Horo were as much pleased to have access to Waikanae Community Board funding. Well, I mean, you smile, but you know, that is a consideration.
It's a valid reason.
I put it to you as the Otaki Community Board that if you stand back, this does two things. The proposal would actually mean that you have more sort of need added to what is a big need in Otaki anyway for funding, and that by taking Te Horo and taking responsibility for it, you actually undermine your ability to do other things in Te Horo, because there's only going to be a certain amount of money allocated to you as a community board. So I put it to you, it's not actually in the interest of the people of Otaki to create a situation of being underrepresented and to create a situation where a community that needs more because it's so small, Te Horo, becomes your responsibility. Yep. So I think it's counterproductive and short-sighted, and it just is got a degree of sentimentality to it, but not well thought through. Yeah,
that's certainly a consideration. Just so has the Waikanae Beach Residents Association actually talked to Friends of Te Horo Beach, which is their residents association, about you taking over their spot? I know this is slightly off topic, but I just want to make sure that...
Yeah, I was just going to comment that it's a bit off topic.
Well, sorry, what I'm trying to get at is if he's speaking, if Pat is speaking on behalf of the Waikanae Beach Residents Association, that's not representing Te Horo. There is a Te Horo Residents Association.
I agree, absolutely. We know, that there's a thriving community association there, and so we would not, as with Peka Peka, dream of sort of, trying to, in any sense, damage it. But it would be something that we would, if Te Horo residents were wanting to be in a bigger, more active association, or rather more resourced. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Pat.
Councillor Coe.
Following on from Matt, as a committee member of the Friends of Te Horo Beach Association, I'd just like to say we, at this stage, would have probably not very much interest in being part of a wider group. But look, Pat, I think, you can look at this problem in a number of different ways, and what you've presented is a very logical argument based on numbers and statistics and what have you. Do you feel it's appropriate that the sentiments and feelings of the Te Horo community should be able to add some weight to the argument one way or the other? Because if the answer to that is yes, I can reassure you that as Community Board Member Butler has pointed out, there is quite a strong sentiment in the community that they look more towards Otaki than Waikanae, even though Waikanae does have quite a bit of money to dish out, which we have availed ourselves of. My question is, do you think it's valid to take community sentiment into account, particularly given that in Kapiti we have a number of community identities here. People identify with their local community, Paikakariki, Raumati, etc., etc. So there is very much that sort of community feel. Is that important? Should we be considering that?
Well, two things. First of all, it's not in any sense clear that that is the majority view. I know of people who live in Te Horo who have the opposite view. Secondly, Councillor Cootes presented it in great detail, very forcefully, to the Local Government Commission. And the Local Government Commission looked at that, listened to it on that occasion, a full-scale review. They then looked at the detail of the facts of where people go, and they said that there are links, and of course the motorway also has changed the links, but that there are links to both wards, and they then made a judgment. So you are proposing that, having had a very emotional presentation to the body that finally will decide this, because you will trigger a review, there will be a review, so they will decide it. They looked at it in 2021, and what you're doing is saying, well, you looked at it in 2021, but we're going to insist upon you looking at it again.
I think that point's been made.
So the answer is that, of course, the views are important, but A, they should have been systematically canvassed rather than, with respect, just getting anecdotal views of individuals now. So this, in that sense, the matter should be left. Could I just very briefly say that there will be detailed census data shortly, but not in time for this review, in which will say where people in Te Horo go, where they actually commute, based on the 2023 census. So that'll be available so you can look at it. Secondly, if the Maori ward was rejected, and I'm not suggesting that I'm advocating that, but if it was rejected, the result of this boundary change would be that the percentage discrepancies would be intolerable. It would be that instead of being 11%, that it would be that the Otaki ward would have a discrepancy of underrepresentation of something like 15 to 20%. And so there would have to be a change. And the Local Government Commission, when they last looked at the matter, they said Te Horo into Waikanae ward is the solution. I suggest they do the same again, so you're wasting your time.
So just following up from that, so I'm just making sure I've understood this correctly. So you're saying that without the Māori wards, these discrepancies are worse. Doesn't that mean that the discrepancies were worse the last time we went to the Local Government Commission? So something has actually changed with this proposal? Assuming the Māori wards go through?
The situation is that on the numbers put up by the Local Government Commission, if you didn't have a Maori ward, if you decided now not to proceed with it, you would have an 11.65% underrepresentation for Otaki as matters stood. And so that would trigger a need for a review. And in that review, the question would be to solve it, the only way that could be solved is that there be that you change the number of councillors, you increase it substantially, which you probably nobody wants to do, or the Local Government Commission would have to consider Nigel Wilson's solution. That is that they would have to consider taking the 700 people could be moved to the Waikanae ward, thereby reducing the discrepancy back below the 10%. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Warwick.
I'm the Otaki Ward Councillor. I am the Otaki Ward Councillor. So there is a lot of history with Te Horo and Otaki as a community.
Don't debate with the speaker, please.
Yeah, but my question is, have you considered in what your proposal or your recommendation, the growth that is going to happen in Otaki and Te Horo, which will potentially lead us to have more than one councillor if we grew that big?
Well, here's the point, that the number would be 11.65 if there were no Maori ward. So the issue would be, well, in order to justify 2 councillors, let's put it this way, that if you had 2 councillors, then you'd be wildly overrepresented. So that in order to get to a satisfactory outcome, there has to be that Otaki, which is growing fast, it's best if in fact there's a move of people into Waikanae ward to make it so that the balance works better. Now, so your argument, which is valid, that Otaki's population is increasing, is actually a reason why, in terms of fair representation, it is better if Te Horo is in the Waikanae ward and the blocks up to the Otaki River. It's a very workable solution to the entire future of Kapiti, that the Waikanae ward goes from Waikanae River to the Otaki River, and that as Otaki grows, that would accommodate, the proportionalities would work out well. But you won't be in a position to have to make the case for 2 councillors in the foreseeable future when you look at the numbers.
Yeah, thank you for that answer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today, Mr. Doonan. I really appreciate the work that's gone into this and you providing us with your perspective.
Could I just say thank you very much for the time you've given me? And secondly, that I have been critical of the staff. I'm not sure why we're in this situation quite, but I don't want that to be seen as a adverse reflection on the KCDC staff, as I do appreciate, for example, my OIA requests have been very satisfactorily answered, and so I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you for that endorsement. So we move on to item 6, members' business. Any leaves of absences? Matters of an urgent nature? No. So we move on to the reports and straight on to the representation review, initial representation arrangements proposal. And I'll welcome Steffi Happily to the table to introduce this. I'd also like to welcome Dale Lofsofsky, who's here to help us once again. Welcome. Nice to see you in person. Do we have a microphone for Dale? Welcome, Mark.
Through you, Madam Mayor, kia ora koutou. I'm here to introduce the representation review report. and I will take it largely as read, but just wanted to point out that the report seeks council to make a decision on the initial proposal. There is some commentary in the report around the bill that's currently going through Parliament, and it passed its second reading last week. And we understand that it's going before Parliament again either today or tomorrow, and it will likely pass. However, until the bill has been enacted and has received royal assent, there is no possibility for council to make any considerations in relation to that bill, but it has been included in the reports for everyone to be aware. The three options that we're therefore asking you to make a decision on, they are outlined in the report, and option 1 and 2 are based on feedback received from the community through the preliminary community engagement. And then there's an option 3, which is based on an option provided by a member of the community during a public speaking time. What I could also add is in relation to once the bill passes, there has been an amendment that was made last week by Parliament, and now Council will very likely have to make an active decision to either affirm or rescind. So previously when the bill was introduced, the content of the bill said that if Council wanted to simply continue, they didn't need to act on anything. That would just require a poll at the next election. But now there needs to be an active decision. So Council will also have to affirm their decision in due course. I can answer any questions.
Any questions from the table? I've got one to start off with. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions related to the public speaker today. So I just wanted to confirm if the public speaker who spoke today came back with a submission and there were other submissions that supported that point of view as a scenario, would we then be able to alter this proposal when we put it through to the Local Government Commission?
So the process is outlined in the Local Electoral Act, and Council will be required to consider all of the submissions made as part of the formal consultation. So yes, if the person made a submission, if Mr. Dwynnen made a submission, Council would be required to consider that, and then could decide to accept that, especially if there were multiple submissions, and alter the proposal to reflect that in the final proposal. Yep.
Now, in terms of these percentages, I'm just going to follow up on a question that I asked that I didn't feel like I quite understood at the end of it. So if you look at the table on page 21, look at the figure on the in the red, 11.32% underrepresented. Is this the same quantum as was considered by the Local Government Commission in 2021? Or has it been reduced by the introduction of a Māori ward?
Because you've had to take out the Māori electoral population in these figures here, whereas last time it was the total population.
Yeah, I guess we don't know how much by. It's 11.32. I'm recalling it being significantly more than that, maybe even a couple of %, but that's just off the top of my head.
Yes, sorry, I don't have that figure with me, but yes, it was a little bit higher than the 11.32.
Yeah, so in fact something has changed since the last time we presented this to the Local Government Commission. Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So just referring to that table, so this includes or removes the Māori electoral population. Is there any likelihood that the percentage of Māori who go into the Māori roll increases substantially because they can vote for a Māori ward?
Councillor. So through you, Madam Chair, people that want to go on the Māori electoral roll can do so up to 3 months before the next elections. So yes, there is a chance that the number of people on that roll will increase. However, the representation review has to be based on a population data at a point in time.
Yes.
And the Local Government Commission has given us guidance on which point in time to use, and we have used that data. So yes, that could happen, but in order to make this decision today, that can't be taken into consideration because we also won't know how many will want to go on the Māori electoral roll. That is impossible to gauge.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions in relation to 69.1, which is on page 20. And so this is one of the recommendations. It says here, the last sentence, it says in 2015, LGC directed council to specifically look at 3 roads, Durham Road, Paul Faith Lane and Pukinamu Road, intersected by the ward boundary, and as a result, in the final 2021 final representation proposal, it was suggested that these mesh blocks were moved into the Otaki ward. So I know that the chair of the Otaki Community Board actually lives in this area, and I also know this area is in Waikanae. So can I just have an explanation about actually ask why it's not actually really clear that this area actually did end up in the Waikanae ward area?
So currently it is in the Waikanae ward. Yes,
I know it is,
I
yes,
can
but it doesn't
confirm that.
actually. It actually implies, the implication here is to look at it going into Otaki ward, whereas it did do, but did not end up there. And so it actually does not give a clear picture of what ended up happening. An explanation for that, please.
Does staff understand that question? I'm not sure that I did. Could you try and repeat that again, please?
So that last sentence says, so council had to look at those 3 roads, and it was suggested that they were moved to the Otaki ward, okay? The outcome of the final outcome was that they did not end up in the Otaki ward. They ended up in the Waikanae ward. And so one would, in reading that, the suggestion to me is that they ended up in the Otaki ward, whereas they did not. So why is it not clear about where they ended up in that statement?
It's not a statement. It's simply a representation of fact. It doesn't say that it was moved.
No, it doesn't, but it doesn't
Thank
actually,
you.
it actually is ambivalent it's an ambivalent statement.
I don't think it has a material influence on the decisions that we're making today. So I think I'll just take that as a comment that paragraph isn't quite clear to you, and we'll move on.
Okay, so I have another question. The sentence before, given Te Horo has traditionally identified strongly with Otaki, this arrangement provides more appropriate representation for Te Horo within the ward structure, considering specific communities of interest in the areas. So given that question wasn't specifically asked in the preliminary review, how has that sentence? Where is the evidence to provide that statement?
So under the local government, the Local Electoral Act, we're required to consider communities of interest. And during the representation, the preliminary engagement that we did in March, while there was no specific question, some of the feedback that was received, it was not the majority, but there was some feedback woven throughout the comments, was around Te Horo moving to Otaki. There was no commentary otherwise. So there was some commentary around moving to Otaki.
I'm more interested today in the arrangement proposal that we have in front of us and making a decision about that rather than relitigating the previous representation review. So do you have any more questions around that, please?
I do,
Councillor
thank
Pavano?
you. So in the preliminary work that was done, there was a number of comments about 2 Waikanae ward councillors being represented on the Waikanae Community Board. That has not come through as a recommendation. Is there any particular reason for that?
I will get Dale to jump in as well with that. But in the Act, there is it is prescribed that there is only a certain number that can be appointed back to community boards. I think it's wording around that there cannot be more appointed member. They can't be less than or more than half of the elected members, which would then bring that out of kilter. So if council wanted to consider more elected members to community boards, which we haven't explored, because feedback has always been around keeping it streamlined. But if that was the case, then it could be considered. But currently, with the current number, that would then violate that.
So
paragraph.
before Dale answers that question, the Paparama Community Board has 2 ward councillors sitting on it. It has 4 elected members. So it is actually no. So what you've just suggested to me doesn't actually marry up with what's actually currently the state in this ward.
Should we go to Dale for some clarification?
You cannot have any more than half of the total number of members on a community that are appointed. So you can go up to just under half. So yes, you're right, you can have more, and this is the forum to make that decision whether you want 1, 2 or 3, but you've got to comply with that less than half of the total, which includes elected and appointed.
Yeah. So if we're wanting to go there, I can say that the Local Government Commission were very strong in their recommendation around the proposals that we have currently.
So in respect, Madam Chair, you've just said not to relitigate what was previously decided.
But that's exactly what. Look, I won't enter into a discussion with you. Can we move on to your next question, please?
Oh, no, I have no more, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Steffi, just brought up with Jocelyn commenting about the table on page 21. If there was a large move from the general electorate to the Māori electorate, could we safely assume that Otaki would be more changed by that, given our Māori represent our Māori population, that would actually improve the underrepresentation?
Yes, but it is hard to gauge.
Yeah, I realise it's hard to gauge, but I'm just trying to think of the figures.
So for future representation reviews, yes, the number could potentially look different. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm looking at the recommendations A, B, which has various parts, C, D, E, F, G, and H on pages 7 and 8.
Yeah, that's right.
Do I have somebody who'd like to move those? Looking around the table.
Yes.
Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Hanford. Right of introduction.
I'll waive it just for now.
Any other debate?
Oh, actually, no, I will speak, Erica, because nobody wants to say anything. So, just on the Tihoro ward and where that fits, and Dale might be able to enlighten us on this, but my understanding is that nothing happens to the people of Tihoro. Like, they don't have to speak a different language. There's not a wall that gets constructed that keeps them out of Otaki. So any sort of cultural attachment to the north isn't eradicated by that move, right? Nothing actually changes for the people of Tihoro at all. They can still ring up the councillors north, south and district-wide on any issue, except they would have... because the Waikanae Community Board has massive pots of gold that they have access to those. So I can't see any sensible reason why people in Otaki would, in Tihoro, would want to change the arrangements. And I agree with Pat, I can't see any viable reason why the Local Government Commission would want to would want to endorse a change to something that they did, and that could throw us down a big hole, which would cost a lot of money. So, just making that note, somebody may have a counter argument to that, but I'm not expecting to hear one. And as far as the rest of it's concerned, it's business as usual. If we are going to have a discussion around the Maori ward, and it doesn't appear that we are, we're just going to carry on doing what we were doing, because that's part of the thing here. But you will probably have read the statements that were made in Parliament. And if you haven't read those statements in Parliament, then I would seriously suggest that you do. The racist dog whistling behind this has been pointed out by a number of parties. I would hate to think that this council would yield to that sort of nonsense. We made a very well considered decision, and I would be appalled if we changed because of some particular marginalised political pressure.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So I note that you moved these recommendations. I'll have my little contribution now. I note that you moved these recommendations, and yet you don't agree with every part of them, and I'm guessing that's in recognition of the fact that we're expecting a very strong submission which would give us grounds to reconsider this before it goes to the Local Government Commission, alongside any other submissions that we receive through that process. As for the Māori wards, the new legislation is going to require us to make a decision whether to continue or to rescind, and that's a conversation to happen once that legislation has gone through. But certainly we've had we had it reiterated yet again at Te Whakaminenga Okapiti this morning that our iwi partners strongly support us carrying on with that process. Mr. Butler.
Kia ora anō. So two parts to Nigel's speech there. Very strongly agree with your second part, disagree with the first part. I'm in an interesting situation in that when I first moved to the area, I went into Te Horo, I was in the Otaki ward, but I actually thought I would do everything with Waikanae. Over the next year or so, we moved all of our activities to the Otaki area because that's where we just naturally ended up associating with. Then the line actually got moved over my property because I was on Paul Faith Lane, but I still remained with the Otaki Community Board because that's where the association is. At the last local government election, I actually had people messaging me, ringing me up, saying, why on earth have I got Waikanae papers? Why am I voting for Waikanae people? For people from Te Horo Beach who didn't understand or didn't get the gist that they were now in the Waikanae community area. Some of them, of course, did ask who should I vote for, and I was like, no, can't say anything. But there is that association, and from being within the Te Horo community, but also operating largely in the Otaki community, I've had almost 100% feedback that those people there associate with Otaki, not Waikanae. I understand the money side of things, and it's been great for like the Te Horo Hall to be able to access the Waikanae Board funds, and I would love for the Otaki Community Board to have that pot, but I think we spent it and you guys thrifted it away, which was 6 1/2 dozen the other. But certainly from what I've seen from being out in the Te Horo area, that the Te Horo people would definitely prefer to be in the Otaki ward. Also, the current arrangement physically splits a community of interest in half to the point where one side of the road versus the other is a different ward. Okay, and that community of interest should be kept together. And I could even concede that maybe it's the Otaki River should be the boundary, but from what I can see and from what I've talked to people, very strongly the Te Horo people wish to be in the Otaki area. And I can't vote, but I do urge you to vote for the move.
Well, that's something that will be part of our final decision, I think. Councillor Kirby?
I'd be interested in, I will be supporting the motion as it is, and hope that through the process of our representation review that we get the strong voice that we need to hear around the bit that holds a bit of controversy in this conversation today.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So, as Mr. Butler said, there are those people who associate with the north from that area. But if you look at ex-councillor Coots, for example, he had both his business in Waikanae and his children went to school to the south as well. So for every person who goes north, you have just as many going south. So in terms of doing that, there's so many, it talks about community of interest. Where the ward boundary is does not actually stop people associating with other people. It's only one aspect of their life. And I think if you talk to particularly the Te Horo Hall, they can see the massive benefits of them being involved in Waikanae. So I think really this area there needs to be some really good questions when it comes to trying to actually understand what Te Horo residents actually think. So that's my first comment. My second comment too is I am disappointed that we have a disparity between ward councillors on community boards, where there is no reason why you cannot have 2 Waikanae ward councillors on the Waikanae Community Board. And I'd like that to be addressed too, please. Thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
I think it would be good for us to put it back to the community and ask them what they want, but it sends a message if we vote to bring Te Horo back to Otaki that actually this is not working. The community didn't want this. They didn't vote for it. It was put upon them, and maybe they could review that decision so that we get Te Horo back.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm supportive of this motion moving forward. The only real concern I've got is whether we should have actually put the Te Horo stuff in this round or put it out, because we've taken on board what came through in the initial or preliminary consultation process, if you like, and if we'd perhaps put this out in the main consultation process, we might be getting more feedback. But because we're actually making the change, although it is what we are preferring to see happen, that we might not get as much comment on it as we would have otherwise. But we'll see how that goes. One of the things I've noticed since moving here, I'm still a newbie, I've only been here 15 years, and is everyone's pretty parochial around here. Everyone's pretty proud of where they're from, and we have quite specific areas. So I take on board what Cam said with regards to it's not really fully in one or fully in the other. I don't think it needs to be with Te Horo, otherwise that's just not fair on them. And I take on board what Pat's saying as well. But this is what the Commission did. They looked at everything statistically. And there's a little bit more than statistics here. There is actually where people live and where they want to be associated to. And the thing about up at the Kapiti Coast, it's a bit different because it's a whole heap of townships that have come together to form an area. And I think splitting one in half is not necessarily a great thing, whichever way it goes. So I'll be very interested to see what we hear back from the community, and we'll be making decisions on that as well, taking on board what Councillor Bovanov has said as well around the ward councillor situation. But I will be supporting this, and it'll be very interesting to see what our community says.
Councillor Handford.
Yeah, just tautoko Councillor Halliday's comments around waiting to hear back from our community as to what we put out there as an initial proposal. I also just want to thank staff for accommodating the concerns of the Emerald Glen residents, and looking forward to hearing about specifically around which community board they would like to be connected with. Moving them back into the Paekākere-Hiromati ward was what they asked for. But yeah, I think associating them with the Paekākere community board is a great place to start with this proposal, and then we can potentially tweak that when it comes back to the table. And I understand there'll be some quite targeted engagement with people who are most directly affected by specifically those boundary changes, potential boundary changes. So looking forward to the engagement that will also provoke, and also just to tautoko Councillor Wilson's comments around the Māori ward conversation, and looking forward to us continuing to be strong in our support of our iwi partners in that kōrero as well.
Thank you. Right of reply, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just briefly, I agree with the idea, by the way, of Te Horo being all north or all south. It just makes sense that it's all in the same place. And I'm not sure what criteria the Local Government Commission used, but I'm pretty sure they didn't just go on stats. I'm pretty sure they would have taken into account a whole, well, they had the impassioned pleas of Councillor Coots and others, and then they came to the decision they came to. So, but I think I would be advocating that it's, you know, you're all in this one or you're all in that one. That just makes sense. To divide them by a road doesn't make any sense at all to me. And just, I want to congratulate the staff, actually. I know this is a really, really tricky area when it comes to this sort of stuff, and everybody's got an opinion. But I think the way forward is here. You know, the documents are fine. So we'll just go out and consult, see what people have got to say, and then we'll make a well-considered, rational decision, as we always do.
Okay, so I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Okay, so I'll reiterate, well, we've already voted, but I was quite clear when we moved and seconded that we're moving A through H on pages 6 to 8. I actually said page 7 and 8, but it's actually pages 6 to 8 of council agendas, but I was quite clear that it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G and H. So that's carried. Sorry, you've already voted, Councillor Pravanov. I believe you did. We're moving on to item 8, which is a public excluded item. So I'll have a mover that we move into public excluded. Moved by Councillor Coe, seconded by Councillor Kirby. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried.